All right, today on Musician's Edition, we're continuing to work through our Essential Elements Snare Drum book, and that brings us today to number 127. All right, so in 127, we have some really fun stuff we get to work on here, right? You'll notice in this piece there's a whole bunch of flams, right? And remember, when we were talking about flams in number 126 in our last video, we talked about trying to keep that grace note down, right? Trying to keep the grace note really low to the surface of the drum. And we talked in that video about how a lot of times the keeping that grace note low comes from prepping in the notes leading up to that flam for that hand to be down once we get to the flam, okay? So we've got lots of opportunities to work on that in this piece. The measure with the most flams, and the one we're going to start with, is measure 7, okay? Now you see, measure 7 is really the only measure in this piece that has any stickings written in for you. So we're also going to start with that one, and that will kind of give us maybe a couple of hints as to how we want to stick the rest of the piece too. So sometimes it's nice to start with the suggested stickings and then see if you can kind of make those a little bit more, or make those consistent across the rest of the piece whenever those decisions are up to you to make, okay? So in measure 7, we have right, left hand flam, left, right hand flam, right, left hand flam, okay? Now, the way that this lines up, every time we play a single eighth note, the next note that hand plays is going to be the grace note of a flam, right? So every time we play a single eighth note, we want to leave it down, low to the surface, right? Or what we might call a downstroke, right? So when we play that eighth note, we're going to leave the stick down and close to the surface and not lift it back, not let it rebound back up like we normally would. Let's try a couple of these just kind of in isolation here. So just on beat 1, we're going to play a downstroke with our right hand and then a flam with our left hand, okay? Down with the right, flam with the left. See if you can catch yourself letting that stick bounce up too high. And notice if I get here after the eighth note, I'm kind of stuck, right? At this point, I have to get that stick to go back down in order to set myself up for the flam. So that's why we want to leave it down and be set up for it. All right, so now let's try some of those on beat 2, which is the opposite sticking. So we have a left hand single eighth note that we're going to play as a downstroke, and then a flam with the right hand. Okay, left hand downstroke, flam with the right. Okay, then we can start to play those back to back. Down, flam. Okay, now let's see if we can do 2 of those back, or we can do each one of those back to back. So down with the right, flam with the left, down with the left, flam with the right. Okay, it's a little bit tricky. There's a lot to think about in there, especially with keeping the eighth note down, right? Down, flam, down, flam. And we're always shooting to keep those flam notes the same dynamic as the single eighth notes, right? We don't want the flams to stick out. Sometimes it's tempting to play it like this, right? But we would only play it that way if they were marked with accents on the flams, and these are not, right? So we want them to be the same volume as the single notes surrounding them, okay? So another thing to listen for as you're practicing these. Down, flam, and it's all the same volume. Let's try it again. Ready, go. And I like to practice stuff like this. I like to practice things like this kind of on a loop. So once I get that down, flam, then I can stay in that and get a bunch of repetitions at it, right? Down, flam, and just play a whole bunch of them right in a row, trying to really listen closely and make sure that they all sound really, really consistent. They all sound the same, okay? Now you see on beat 3, we have another down with the right, flam with the left, and then we're at the end of the measure, right? So let's see if we can play that whole measure. Down, flam, down, flam, down, flam, right. And that will take us into the last measure of the piece. Okay, so let's try all of measure 7 plus the first note of measure 8. Ready, and go, and. And again, ready, go. Okay. Now to finish out the piece, we just need to play 2 and a 3 in measure 8, right? So we have down, flam, down, flam, down, flam, right, 2 and a 3. Let's try that. Ready, and go, and. Okay? Now let's look back at the beginning of this line and kind of slowly piece the second half of this number 127 together here, okay? So starting at measure 5, we'll kind of count through it first. We have one tricky rhythm in measure 6 with an 8th rest on the beat, and we'll hit that in a second when we get to it. So measure 5, we have 1 and 2 E and 3 E and flam at the beginning of measure 6, right? So let's try that much. All of measure 5 plus the first note of measure 6. Ready, go. Okay? And on 2E and 3E and, you can play right, left, right, right, left, right, or you could play right, left, right, left. Either one is totally fine, okay? Again, if you find one or the other that you plan on using every time, go ahead and write it in, give yourself some cues in there so that you play it the same way every time, okay? So now once we get to the beginning of measure 6, we got to rest on 2, play 2 16th notes on the and of 2, right? So we have flam, rest, and a 3 and a 1, right? Flam, rest, and a 3 and a 1. Let's try that much. All of measure 6 plus the first note of measure 7 as well. Ready, and go, and. And one more time, measure 6 plus the first note of 7. Ready, and go, and. Okay? Now let's try it from the beginning of that line, from the beginning of 5. See if we can work our way all the way to the end here, okay? So measure 5 all the way to the end. Ready, and go, and. And you may have found once you got to those flams, it might have felt a little bit tricky, right? Because we've only practiced those in isolation. We haven't practiced them in context, right? So keep working on kind of bridging that gap, right? And working on getting the parts we've worked on in isolation to kind of fit in that context, right? And the smaller that context can be, the easier it is to practice. But the goal is to practice getting into the tricky passage and getting out of the tricky passage, okay? So let's do one more time from 5 to the end. Ready, and go, and. Okay? Now, let's see if we can find some familiar things in the first line, right? You see in measure 3, we have an 8th rest on 1, very similar to the rhythm that we have on beat 2 of measure 6, right? Rest on 1, play on and a. Rest and a 2, right? Rest and a 2 and 3 and. So let's try that measure, all of measure 3. Ready, and go, and. Okay? Now once that's comfortable, we need to work out the flams in measure 1, right? Flam, left, right, flam. And you could either play flam on the right, right, left, flam on the right. That's one option. Or you could play flam on the right, flam on the left, okay? A lot of times, if I do have flams that are close together, I like to play them on the same hand if I can, because chances are my sound's gonna be a little bit more consistent that way if I'm playing the flams with the same hand, right? So I'm gonna make the choice in measure 1 to play flam, right, left, flam with the right. Okay, so that looks like this. Okay, right flam, right, left, right flam. One more time. Ready, and go, and. All right. Now, once I have that, the only thing we haven't done is measure 2 and measure 4. All right. So if I look at measure 2, I have 1, 2E, and 3, and no big deal there, other than being ready for that 8th rest on beat 1 of measure 3. So we'll just kind of have our head up as we're getting through measure 2, making sure we're ready for that rhythm. Okay. And then measure 4, we have flam, right, left, right, flam, right, left, 3, and okay, flam, 2, and 3, and then we're ready to jump into the second line. All right, so let's play all of line 1. Again, keeping our eyes up for that rhythm coming up at the beginning of measure 3, and then being ready for the flam at the beginning of measure 4. Making sure that our left hand that plays the 8th note at the end of measure 3, right before the flam, stays down, just like we worked on at the end of this piece, and ready to play the flam on the right hand. Okay, so here's all of the first line. Ready and go and. Okay. And again, give that as many repetitions as you need for that first line to feel really comfortable. Same thing with the second line, as many repetitions as you need to make it feel comfortable. Now remember, when we were working on 126, we talked about bridging that gap between the lines, right? So if we were to apply that same process here, we would take measure 4 and play measure 4 plus measure 5 and work on jumping from line to line, right? In this case, measure 4 to measure 5 isn't really that tricky, so we're gonna leave it alone and assume that it's going to be okay when we get there. If we happen to go from measure 4 into measure 5 and it feels a little bit uncomfortable, then we can come back and go through that process at that point before we put the whole piece together again. All right, so at this point, we're ready to play the whole thing. So let's try it all the way from the beginning. And here we go. Ready and go and. All right, and then you see there's a repeat sign at the end. So when we do this whole thing for real, then we're gonna play all of it 2 times in a row. So to finish up, let's play it that way with the repeat and everything. Again, keeping our head up, thinking ahead, always ready for the next thing that's coming up, whether it's flams or a rest or whatever. We're always trying to kind of think ahead, keeping our eyes up. All right, here we go, all the way from the beginning with the repeat this time. And ready and go and. All right, so again, take your time, break the piece down, work on the different components, build it back up, bridge the gaps, and then be ready to put the whole piece together in its full context, all right? So take your time, keep working on it, happy practicing, and I'll see you next time.